Imagine waking up each morning and realizing that the way you choose to see the world can either fill your day with peace or with suffering. The same sunrise, the same faces, the same challenges appear before you, but your mind decides whether to notice the beauty in them or to be trapped by their flaws. What if the secret to living a lighter, freer, and more meaningful life was simply learning to look for the good? When we speak of mindful perception in the context of Buddhism, we are touching upon one of the most essential practices that shapes the way a person sees the world and experiences life. At its core, mindful perception is about becoming fully aware of the present moment and choosing consciously what we allow our attention to rest upon. The human mind, by its very nature, tends to cling to negativity. Evolutionarily, we are wired to notice dangers, threats, and shortcomings more than the blessings that surround us. This negativity bias often leads us to overlook the beauty, kindness, and goodness that is constantly unfolding in our daily lives. In Buddhist practice, mindfulness becomes the antidote to this imbalance. It trains the mind to pause, to see things clearly as they are, and to deliberately notice the good that might otherwise remain hidden beneath the noise of craving, fear, and dissatisfaction. Mindful perception does not mean ignoring the suffering, injustice, or challenges of existence. Rather, it is about holding a balanced view, one that sees suffering but also recognizes joy, one that acknowledges hardship but also notices kindness. When we sit in meditation and bring our attention to the breath, we begin to witness how thoughts rise and fall. Some thoughts are negative, some are neutral, and some are uplifting. Without mindfulness, we become entangled in them, believing them fully, letting them define our state of mind. But with mindful perception, we learn that each thought is just a passing event, like a cloud in the sky. This awareness allows us to shift our attention toward the wholesome and positive qualities of life without being trapped in cycles of negativity. Looking for the good through mindfulness transforms not only the way we experience the outer world, but also the way we relate to ourselves. Often, people are their own harshest critics. They see flaws in their character, mistakes in their past, and imperfections in their present. Buddhism teaches that clinging to these judgments only deepens suffering. By practicing mindful perception, we can train ourselves to notice the seeds of goodness within us. The moments of kindness we have shown, the patience we have cultivated, the wisdom we have slowly nurtured. These small recognitions create a sense of self-compassion, which becomes the fertile ground for further growth. When a person learns to see the good within themselves, they are better able to recognize and appreciate it in others. On a practical level, mindful perception means slowing down and becoming attentive to simple details that often go unnoticed. A person walking mindfully might notice the cool breeze brushing against their face, the sound of birds singing in the distance, or the gentle smile of a stranger passing by. In these seemingly ordinary experiences lies extraordinary beauty. To look for the good is to awaken to these small yet profound reminders that life itself is a gift. Buddhism encourages this kind of attentive living because it pulls the mind away from constant craving for what is missing and roots it in gratitude for what is already present. There is also a transformative power in mindful perception when it comes to relationships. Human beings naturally make judgments about others, often focusing on shortcomings, mistakes, or differences. These judgments lead to conflict, division, and resentment. But when someone practices mindfulness and makes a conscious effort to see the good in others, they open the door to compassion. Instead of labeling someone by their faults, they begin to recognize their struggles, their intentions, and the moments of goodness they embody. This shift in perception reduces anger and cultivates understanding. Over time, it changes the entire dynamic of relationships, bringing more harmony and less conflict. In Buddhist teachings, perception is seen as a lens that can either distort reality or illuminate it. An untrained mind sees through a lens clouded with greed, hatred, and delusion. A trained mind, however, learns to see clearly and with balance. Looking for the good does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It means acknowledging that within imperfection lies beauty. Within struggle lies resilience, and within each human being lies a spark of goodness. This outlook does not deny reality. It enriches it by allowing us to see the fullness of life. Mindful perception also has a profound impact on how we respond to suffering. When faced with difficulties, an unmindful mind fixates on what is wrong and amplifies pain through endless mental chatter. But a mindful mind looks deeply, not only at the pain, but also at the conditions that support healing and growth. For instance, someone going through a loss may notice the grief, but also become aware of the support of friends, the kindness of strangers, or the wisdom gained from impermanence. This balanced perception makes suffering more bearable and helps transform it into an opportunity for growth. In a broader sense, mindful perception helps us connect to the interconnected nature of existence. When we pause to notice the good, we begin to see how everything we enjoy is made possible by countless conditions. A simple meal is not just food on a plate. It is the effort of farmers, the rain that nourished the crops, the soil that held the seeds, the sun that gave energy, and the hands that prepared it. To see the good in this way is to see interdependence and to feel gratitude for the web of life that supports us. This awareness deepens our sense of belonging and diminishes feelings of isolation. Ultimately, mindful perception is both a practice and a way of being. It is cultivated through meditation, but it extends far beyond the cushion into every moment of life. It asks us to train the mind not to dwell in resentment, not to cling to what is lacking, but to look with fresh eyes at the abundance already present. In doing so, we reduce suffering, increase joy, and align ourselves with the compassionate spirit of Buddhist living. Compassion and gratitude lie at the very heart of Buddhist living, shaping the way a person relates to themselves, to others, and to the world as a whole. When we speak of compassion, we are referring to the deep wish to alleviate the suffering of others and to respond with kindness, patience, and understanding. Gratitude, On the other hand, is the recognition of the countless blessings, conditions, and relationships that make life possible. These two qualities are not separate. Rather, they are deeply intertwined, each nourishing the other. Compassion opens the heart to the goodness of others, and gratitude strengthens our ability to see that goodness clearly. Together, they create a foundation for a meaningful and awakened life. In everyday life, it is easy for people to become absorbed in what they lack or what causes them frustration. The mind naturally gravitates toward dissatisfaction, constantly comparing and craving. This endless cycle of wanting often blinds us to the goodness that already surrounds us. Gratitude shifts this perspective. It invites us to pause and reflect on what we have, to notice the small acts of kindness we receive each day, and to feel appreciation for them. The very act of breathing, the gift of waking up to a new day, the presence of loved ones, or even the quiet support of strangers who make life possible. These are all conditions for gratitude. By consciously recognizing them, we soften the grip of dissatisfaction and begin to cultivate joy. Compassion arises when we truly see the interconnectedness of life. When we realize that our own well-being is tied to the well-being of others, it becomes natural to care for them. In Buddhism, compassion is not about pity or superiority, but about genuine empathy. It is the recognition that just like us, every being experiences suffering and wishes to be free from it. When we look for the good in others, we open the door to compassion because we no longer reduce them to their faults or mistakes. Instead, we acknowledge their humanity, their struggles, and their potential for kindness. This change in perception helps dissolve barriers of judgment and replaces them with bridges of understanding. Gratitude, too, has a transformative effect on relationships. When we cultivate gratitude, we begin to notice the efforts others make, often silently and without recognition. A friend who listens patiently, a parent who sacrifices for their children, a colleague who offers help, or even the simple smile of a passerby. All of these become moments of connection when seen through the lens of gratitude. This recognition deepens bonds and encourages reciprocity. We feel moved to give back, not out of obligation, but out of genuine appreciation. In this way, gratitude nourishes compassion, creating a cycle of giving and receiving that uplifts both giver and receiver. In Buddhist practice, compassion is not limited to those who are easy to love. It extends even to those who may have caused harm or who act out of ignorance. This is not to excuse harmful actions, but to understand that beneath unskillful behavior lies suffering. A person who lashes out in anger is often carrying deep wounds. When we can look for the good even in such individuals, we begin to see their pain and their potential for change. This perspective allows us to respond with wisdom rather than hatred, and in doing so, we contribute to breaking cycles of violence and resentment. Gratitude plays a role here as well, reminding us that even in painful encounters, there are lessons to be learned and opportunities for growth. Compassion and gratitude also extend inward toward oneself. Many people struggle with self-criticism and feelings of inadequacy. believing they are unworthy of love or kindness. Buddhist teachings encourage us to meet ourselves with the same compassion we would offer to a friend. To acknowledge our efforts, to forgive our mistakes, and to appreciate our progress is an act of gratitude toward the self. This self-compassion does not lead to complacency, but to resilience, for when we feel supported from within, we are better able to face challenges and extend kindness to others. The practice of meditation often strengthens these qualities. Loving kindness meditation, for example, involves silently repeating phrases of goodwill such as, "May you be happy, may you be safe, may you live with ease." By starting with oneself and gradually extending these wishes to loved ones, strangers, and even difficult people, the heart learns to expand beyond narrow self-interest. Gratitude meditation involves reflecting on the many visible and invisible contributions that sustain our lives. Such practices rewire the mind, making compassion and gratitude natural responses rather than forced efforts. In the wider world, compassion and gratitude have ripple effects. A compassionate act, no matter how small, can inspire others to act in kind. Gratitude, when expressed openly, can uplift those around us and remind them of their own value. When communities embody these qualities, they become places of support and harmony rather than division and conflict. This collective spirit reflects the Buddhist vision of interdependence, where the happiness of one is inseparable from the happiness of all. Even in the face of suffering, compassion and gratitude can guide us. When tragedy strikes, it is natural to feel grief and pain. Yet compassion reminds us to be gentle with ourselves and to care for others who share the burden. Gratitude helps us see that even in loss, love existed, and the memories we carry are gifts. In this way, these two qualities do not deny suffering, but help us navigate it with dignity and grace. By consistently practicing compassion and gratitude, we train the mind to look for the good in every situation. We see that behind each challenge lies an opportunity to grow in empathy, and behind each ordinary moment lies something to be thankful for. Over time, this perspective reshapes our entire experience of life, making it richer, more peaceful, and more connected. The idea of the inner guide in the Buddhist lifestyle speaks to the wisdom that lies within each person, a wisdom that is not dependent on external approval or constant instruction, but one that arises from direct experience, mindfulness, and ethical awareness. When we talk about an inner guide, we are pointing toward the capacity of the mind to discern between what brings peace and what brings suffering, what leads to compassion and what fuels greed or hatred. In Buddhist practice, the inner guide is not a voice of command, but a quiet presence cultivated through meditation and self-reflection that helps a person navigate the complexities of life with clarity and balance. From an early age, human beings are conditioned to look outward for guidance. Parents, teachers, society, and culture all play roles in shaping our understanding of right and wrong, success and failure, good and bad. While external guidance is important, Buddhism emphasizes that true liberation comes from turning inward and awakening to our own capacity for wisdom. This is not about rejecting the wisdom of others, but about realizing that no one can walk the path of mindfulness for us. Only we can observe the workings of our mind. Only we can notice the intentions behind our actions. And only we can choose how to respond to the circumstances of our lives. The inner guide becomes the compass that keeps us aligned with what is wholesome and liberating. This inner guide is cultivated most directly through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. When sitting in silence, observing the breath, or watching the flow of thoughts and emotions, we begin to recognize patterns that govern our behavior. We notice how certain thoughts lead to agitation, while others bring calm. We see how clinging to desire causes restlessness, and how letting go brings peace. Over time, this direct experience shapes our ability to trust the wisdom within. Instead of reacting blindly, we pause, listen inwardly, and act from a place of awareness. The more we practice, the more reliable the inner guide becomes, like a lamp that illuminates our path in the darkness. An important aspect of this inner guide is ethical sensitivity. In Buddhism, the path to awakening is inseparable from ethical conduct. When the mind is clouded by harmful actions, deceit, or ill will, it becomes difficult to hear the quiet wisdom within. But when we cultivate honesty, kindness, and integrity, the mind settles and clarity arises naturally. The inner guide flourishes in a mind that is at peace with itself, a mind unburdened by guilt or inner conflict. It helps us see the consequences of our actions before they manifest, allowing us to choose paths that are aligned with compassion and wisdom. The inner guide also teaches us the importance of self-reliance. It reminds us that while teachings, scriptures, and teachers are valuable, they are like fingers pointing to the moon. They can indicate the way, but we must see the moon for ourselves. If we become overly dependent on external authorities, we may never learn to trust our own capacity for insight. The Buddhist approach is to encourage inquiry and direct experience. When doubts arise, we look inward, observing carefully whether a thought or action leads to suffering or liberation. This ongoing inquiry strengthens the inner guide and builds confidence in our own wisdom. In daily life, the presence of the inner guide manifests in subtle but powerful ways. When faced with conflict, instead of reacting with anger, the inner guide might remind us to pause, breathe, and respond with understanding. When tempted by craving, it might whisper that chasing after more will not bring lasting happiness. When confronted with despair, it may help us remember impermanence and the possibility of renewal. These gentle reminders are not imposed from outside, but arise naturally when the mind is trained to be still and aware. They are signs that the inner guide is active and trustworthy. Another dimension of the inner guide is its ability to help us navigate uncertainty. Life is filled with unpredictable changes, and often there are no clear answers to the questions we face. External advice may conflict, and circumstances may shift suddenly. In such moments, the inner guide offers a deeper kind of knowing, one that is less about rigid certainty and more about intuitive alignment with compassion and mindfulness. It does not guarantee that outcomes will always be favorable, but it ensures that our choices come from a place of integrity and awareness. This inner compass brings peace even in difficult times, because we know we are acting from sincerity and wisdom rather than confusion or fear. The inner guide is also what allows us to grow spiritually. Without it, we may remain caught in cycles of distraction or dependency. But by listening inwardly, we recognize when we are straying from the path and gently bring ourselves back. This self-correcting process mirrors the practice of meditation itself. The mind wanders, we notice, and we return. Over time, this repeated act of returning strengthens trust in the inner guide. It becomes less about following rigid rules and more about embodying a way of being that is grounded, compassionate, and awake. Importantly, the inner guide does not lead us away from the world, but deeper into it. By listening inwardly, we become more attuned to the needs of others, more sensitive to suffering, and more aware of the beauty around us. Far from being selfish, the cultivation of an inner guide enables us to engage with the world more skillfully, because we are not reacting blindly but responding with clarity. In this way, the inner guide becomes not just a personal compass, but a gift to those around us, shaping our actions in ways that create harmony and reduce suffering. In essence, the inner guide is the flowering of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom within us. It is the quiet but steady presence that reminds us to look for the good, to choose kindness over anger, and to see clearly the impermanent and interconnected nature of life. It does not need to be forced or sought outside. It arises naturally when the mind is cultivated with care. By trusting in this inner guide, we align ourselves with the deepest truths of Buddhist living and discover a source of strength and clarity that no external circumstance can take away. Transforming suffering is one of the most profound teachings within the Buddhist way of life, and it represents a shift in how we perceive and respond to the difficulties that inevitably arise in human existence. Suffering, or dukkha, is acknowledged as an inseparable part of life. We experience physical pain, emotional loss, disappointment, aging, sickness, and the uncertainty of change. For many, the natural tendency is to resist suffering, to deny it, to escape from it, or to drown in despair when it cannot be avoided. Yet the Buddhist path does not suggest running away from suffering or being crushed under its weight. Instead, it encourages us to look deeply into it, to understand its causes, and to transform it into wisdom and compassion. This transformation is not about erasing pain, but about using it as a teacher that guides us toward awakening. At the heart of this teaching lies the understanding that suffering is not static. It is dynamic, fluid, and subject to change. Just as a lotus flower grows out of the mud, so too can wisdom and compassion emerge from the fertile ground of difficulty. When we encounter suffering with mindfulness, we begin to see that it carries within it the seeds of growth. For instance, the pain of loss teaches us about impermanence and the preciousness of the present moment. The discomfort of anger reveals the ways we are attached to control or recognition. The restlessness of desire exposes the endless cycle of craving that never truly satisfies. By facing suffering instead of avoiding it, we uncover the lessons it offers, and these lessons become stepping stones on the path to liberation. The practice of meditation plays a vital role in this transformation. When we sit quietly and observe our thoughts and emotions, we often encounter pain, fear, or restlessness. Rather than suppressing these feelings, we are invited to hold them gently with mindful awareness. This act of sitting with suffering, without judgment or resistance, is itself a form of transformation. It allows us to see that suffering is not who we are. It is an experience passing through us. By breathing with it, observing it, and offering it compassion, we create the conditions for it to soften and eventually dissolve. What once felt overwhelming becomes an opportunity to develop patience, resilience, and understanding. In daily life, transforming suffering also means reframing how we interpret difficulties. When something unpleasant happens, such as losing a job, experiencing rejection, or facing illness, the untrained mind often fixates on the unfairness of the situation. This fixation multiplies suffering as we replay events endlessly, compare ourselves to others, or cling to what can no longer be. The trained mind, however, asks different questions. Instead of, "Why me?" it asks, "What can I learn from this?" Or, "How can this situation deepen my compassion for myself and others?" This shift in perspective transforms suffering into a teacher rather than an enemy. One of the profound aspects of Buddhist wisdom is that suffering connects us to others. Often, when we suffer, we feel isolated, as though no one else could possibly understand what we are going through. Yet, when we look more deeply, we see that suffering is a universal experience. Everyone has known loss, fear, disappointment, or longing. Recognizing this shared reality can open the heart to compassion. Instead of closing ourselves off, we realize that our own pain allows us to empathize more deeply with the pain of others. In this way, transforming suffering does not only heal us, but also strengthens our capacity to serve and support those around us. There is also the transformation that comes from gratitude within suffering. Even in the midst of pain, if we look carefully, we can find conditions that support us. A person going through grief may still feel grateful for the love they once shared, for the friends who offer comfort, or for the resilience of the human heart that allows healing to begin. Gratitude does not deny suffering, but softens its sharpness, reminding us that goodness exists even in the darkest times. This balance allows us to hold both pain and beauty together without being overwhelmed by either. Buddhism also teaches the importance of non-attachment in transforming suffering. Much of our pain arises not simply from what happens, but from the way we cling to permanence in a world of change. We suffer when relationships end because we wanted them to last forever, when youth fades because we believed it could be preserved, when plans fail because we assumed control over uncertain outcomes. By practicing non-attachment, we do not reject these experiences, but learn to embrace them fully without grasping. This freedom allows us to appreciate what we have while it lasts and to let go when the time comes, reducing the unnecessary suffering created by resistance. Another dimension of transforming suffering is recognizing that challenges can strengthen our spiritual practice. Just as muscles grow stronger through resistance, the mind and heart develop resilience through facing hardship. A person who has struggled deeply often develops qualities of patience, humility, and wisdom that cannot be learned from comfort alone. Suffering becomes a mirror, showing us where we are still attached, where we still harbor anger, or where we lack compassion. Each challenge becomes an invitation to deepen mindfulness and to expand the capacity of the heart. On a collective level, suffering has the power to awaken societies as well. Communities that endure hardship together often discover solidarity, cooperation, and shared purpose. History shows that many movements for justice, peace, and compassion were born out of collective suffering. In this way, suffering, when transformed, becomes a source not only of personal growth, but of collective awakening. Ultimately, transforming suffering is not about eliminating it from life, but about changing our relationship with it. Instead of fearing it or running away, we turn toward it with awareness, compassion, and curiosity. In doing so, we discover that suffering does not have to imprison us. It can liberate us. It shows us the impermanence of all things, the interconnectedness of all beings, and the possibility of peace, even in the midst of difficulty. Through this transformation, suffering becomes not a curse but a path, guiding us closer to the essence of the Buddhist way of living. Freedom from clinging, compassion for all beings, and the wisdom to see the good even in hardship. The journey of looking for the good through mindful perception, compassion and gratitude, listening to the inner guide, and transforming suffering reveals the essence of a Buddhist lifestyle. It is not about escaping life or denying its difficulties, but about engaging with it in a deeper, wiser, and more compassionate way. Mindful perception teaches us to open our eyes to the beauty and goodness already present. Compassion and gratitude remind us of the power of the heart to connect and appreciate. The inner guide shows us that true wisdom arises from within when we walk the path with sincerity. And the transformation of suffering reveals that even in hardship lies the seed of awakening. Together, these qualities form a way of being that softens the hold of craving and fear, strengthens the bonds we share with others, and cultivates peace in the midst of impermanence. To live in this way is to choose a life of awareness, kindness, and resilience, where every moment, whether joyful or painful, becomes an opportunity to grow and to embody the wisdom of seeing the good in all things.